Okay. Are we live? Yes. All right. Good evening and welcome to the Leadership Germantown Alumni Association Election Forum for the school board seats. My name is Alice Drake, and I am Vice President of the Leadership Germantown Alumni Association. Our organization is a nonprofit. It is nonpartisan and nonpolitical. We seek to engage Leadership Germantown graduates in leadership opportunities in our community. Tonight's purpose is to allow candidates the opportunity to share their vision for our schools. I want to thank the Committee of Leadership Germantown Alumni Association members for all their work to put this forum on. I also want to thank the City of Germantown for allowing us to use this room and all their efforts to make this possible. Another note is you'll notice this room is empty, and that is due to COVID protocols. Everyone has been wearing a mask until they are speaking, and then they will have to put their masks back on. I also want to thank our candidates for participating. And just for a note of reference, there are 3 seats up at this election, 1, 3, and 5. Seats 1 and 5 are uncontested. Therefore, the candidates for those positions, Mr. Ryan Strain and Miss Amy Oaf, are not present tonight. But seat 3 is contested, and we are very grateful to Mr. Brian Curry and Mr. Scott Williams for their willing participation. I want to give you a little bit of background on the process of how the forum came to be. Back in December, the leadership of the Alumni Association reached out to the city and reserved this room for the 2 forums. A committee was formed in February who secured the moderators for the forums. And as soon as the candidates pulled petitions for their positions, a letter was immediately sent advising them as to when these forums would be and asking them to save the date. Once the filing date passed, candidates were invited to the Zoom meeting between Mr. Reeves and myself and the only one contested seat, where we went over the guidelines. And Mr. Reeves will go over those guidelines in just a moment. So I'd like to introduce our moderator. His name is David Reeves. He is the Director of Business Continuity, Global Supply Chain for Nike. He has served on the Shelby County Board of Commissioners and was the Education Chair for District 3, which is Bartlett. And he also served as a board member of the Shelby County Schools District in the years leading up to the establishment of the municipal schools. And David, we would like to thank you for being our moderator, and as a thank you, we have made an honorarium in your name to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Reeves. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Alice. Appreciate that introduction. We're going to jump right into the rules for tonight, and obviously we've sat down and we've agreed upon these, so we're just going to touch base for the audience. We're looking at roughly 60 minutes in duration tonight. Of course, that could be shorter, it could be longer, depending on how much you want to talk. So we're going to see what that looks like tonight. So there will be a maximum of 1 minute allotted for each response to each question, and obviously there will be a primary question, then a rebuttal, and then we can dig deeper if we need to, depending on what the answers look like. Timekeeper will start the clock when the first word of the response is spoken. And there will be visible indications at 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and then you'll see a stop sign when it's the end of your time and your turn. I reserve the right to ask any follow-up questions, and I'll interrupt a candidate. I could interrupt you if I determine that the response is incendiary off topic. I'll be honest with you, let's stick to the issues tonight. There's plenty of issues to talk about, and I think we're going to have a really productive time together. At the end, each candidate has up to 90 seconds to make a closing statement. What we have done is we flipped a coin to see who is going to go first tonight, and that's going to be Mr. Brian Curry. We'll get the first question, and then when we get to the end, Mr. Scott Williams will have the final word in the final 90 seconds. So, any questions before we get started tonight? Okay. So, we obviously went out and we asked the community for questions. So, there's going to be a lot of community questions that you're going to hear tonight, and I will phrase them for the most part in the way that the community asked these questions, okay? So the first question goes to Mr. Brian Curry. Mr. Curry, what makes you qualified to serve as a GMSD school board member?
Thanks, David. I have two daughters in GMSD. My oldest is at Houston Middle School in the 7th grade, and my youngest is at Forest Hill Elementary in the 3rd grade. I am on the PTO Board of Managers at Forest Hill Elementary. I'm serving as the legislative chair there and proud to do so. I was also on the bylaws committee in the formation period of our PTO. Additionally, I'm on the board of the Farmington Presbyterian Day School, serving as a community advisor. Professionally, I have 24 years at FedEx. At age 23, I became a manager. I was a manager for 8 years and then went into management training. I did that for 9 years. I've taught adults all over the U.S. and the world, and I've conducted training and implementations. At the end of the day, you have to have good people for good government. You need people with courage and conviction that are willing to step up to the plate and take on challenges. I'm passionate about our schools, and I want to bring that to the table and help make a difference for our community.
Mr. Williams?
I'm the proud parent of two middle schoolers, Nate and Noah. Nate and Noah at Riverdale Elementary School. I'm currently a labor and employment attorney at FedEx, and I've been practicing law for 20 years. My practice has focused primarily on employee relations, employment policies, employee benefits, and strategic communications. I'm also a former public school teacher, and I'm currently an adjunct professor at Christian Brothers University's Masters of Business Administration program. I have a Master of Education degree from the University of Georgia. My law degree is from Baylor University, and I'm also a graduate of Harvard Law School's program on negotiations. I've been married for 24 years to a first grade teacher who currently teaches at Bodine School here in Germantown. And I think the most important thing that we can do as a community is to do what's best for our students, because when we do what's best for our students, we're doing what's best for our community.
All right, thank you. We're going to move into the section of policy initiatives, and we're going to start with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, what do you feel are the top 3 issues that face GMSD?
Well, I think there are several issues that flow from the current COVID-19 pandemic, the first of which is just the struggle and the frustrations that everyone is experiencing with virtual learning. It's just not the same as in-person instruction. Teachers and students and parents are doing everything they can. I heard an administrator say recently that we need to throw grace around like it's confetti. So we should do that. Everyone needs a little grace here. So I think the primary top-of-mind issue is how we're going to recover from the remote instruction. I'm glad to see that GMSD is advocating for a change in testing and teacher evaluations in Nashville, so I would hope that we can succeed in that in that effort. And I'm also glad to see that we're working to address any BEP funding reductions as a result of enrollment declines.
All right, thank you. We're going to send that question over to Mr. Curry. Mr. Curry, what do you feel are the top 3 issues facing GMSD?
Well, in the short term, we're definitely dealing with the COVID complications. My daughter is at Houston Middle School, and she is going through the hybrid program right now, and I can assure you there's frustration not only with her as a student. I know there's frustration with the teachers and certainly as a parent. So I think that's top of mind right now. I also look across the district. I think we still have facility concerns, particularly at the middle school level. Houston Middle School is in desperate need of an expansion. Right now, Houston Middle School is also the only school in the district without a secured entrance, and I think that's something that needs to be rectified in pretty short order. I know the budget had money for that, and that's been cut, but we need to prioritize that as soon as possible. And I guess the last thing I would probably think about, really is making sure that we're graduating and just teaching well-rounded students. So what is our curriculum? Are we bringing in the arts? Are we giving our children the chance and the programs to succeed?
I'm going to send this back to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, based upon what we've heard so far about policy initiatives, let's dig into COVID-19 a little bit. So what type of policy initiatives would you be an advocate for to help address COVID-19?
Well, because remote instruction is not the same as in-person instruction, I think the state recognized the need to alter the testing requirements in April of 2020. And I think they should do the same thing for April of 2021. It's just simply unfair to our students to evaluate their learning in this environment. And it's also unfair to evaluate our teachers and our district's effectiveness in these conditions.
Send that to Mr. Curry. Mr. Curry, what type of policy initiatives would you pursue in COVID-19?
I'm a bit frustrated with the Shelby County Health Department. I feel like we're subject to different rules than other parts of the state, and I think that that's a negative impact on us. So I just think, I guess from an advocacy standpoint and maybe policy, we've got to get our students back in the classroom. Now, if we have students that wish to continue virtually, I think we can support that, but we've got to eliminate this hybrid model as soon as possible. Testing is also a concern. I don't think that we should penalize our students during this time. We have students that, because I've talked to parents and hear their frustration, students are scoring low scores that they've never scored before. So I think that we need to make sure that we're not penalizing the students for the hoops that we're having to jump through right now to get school moving.
So kind of staying within the policy initiatives conversation, we're going to move over to a question from the community. And this is going to start with Mr. Curry on this question. Mr. Curry, do you believe the GMSD should charge tuition to students who don't live within the city of Germantown? And please explain your reasoning.
Yes, first, and let me be crystal clear so there's no ambiguity around this. We're not talking about city employees or teachers here. Right now, we're faced as a district with a $350,000 a year loss in operating funds due to the school district being on the hook for the settlement to Shelby County. Additionally, we just suffered a $2.5 million reduction in capital funding from the city for the Houston Middle expansion. So I would say now is the time for us to take a look at tuition. The argument I've heard against it is that there's a fear of losing students, and I would say that's an irrational argument. We say that we're one of the best districts in the state, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But you can't say on one hand we're the best, and then you can't say on the other that we're going to lose students because we might charge them $400 to attend. That just doesn't compute for me. The other thing that's the underlying issue with that is it's just a fundamental fairness issue to the taxpayer. So I think we need to consider the community in that regard as well.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Charging tuition to non-resident students who attend our schools does merit some consideration, but I think it's a little more complicated than just asking non-resident students to pay their fair share. When a non-resident student enrolls in GMSD schools, our share of the BEP and ADA funds from the state and the county kind of follow them with them to our schools, and that represents about an $8,500 per student income increase. Based on 2019 enrollment data, there are about 600 of those students. So just doing some math, if 50% of those students, and I don't know how many would decided to leave the district and 50% of them decided to stay, our revenue would increase by about $120,000, $400 times 300 students. But our revenue would decline by about $2.5 million. And I think that's just an asymmetrical risk that we need to be really more cautious about.
All right, thank you. So kind of staying within the same vein of funding, and this is going to start with Mr. Williams this time. In 2012, Germantown residents voted for a half-cent sales tax increase that was projected to meet Germantown's financial obligation for school funding. The city of Germantown stated the increase in the local option sales tax would be sufficient to meet it. In fact, the sales tax revenue has far exceeded the funding given to the school district. Do you think it is fair that the city does not contribute all of the proceeds associated with a sales tax increase to the school district?
To put that in a little context, the city of Germantown provides about 4% of GMSD's operational funds. And this contribution is determined by a formula based on percentage of the property tax value in Germantown. It's called maintenance of effort. And this law requires that the city provide the same level of funding this year that it provided last year. The MOE is not based on enrollment. It's and our city's MOE is about $2.6 million. The wrinkle there is that the city has decided to fund its MOE primarily through a variable revenue source. So they're being very conservative about managing MOE because sales tax revenues ebb and flow over time, so they want to be careful about not overcommitting themselves.
Mr. Curry?
I've not heard of a resident that has decided to move to Germantown because of our AAA bond rating. So I feel that the city should definitely prioritize our schools more so than what they're doing. Now, to be fair, they've given a lot of money to us for capital improvements. I believe the Forest Hill Elementary project was somewhere around $30 million. They funded an expansion at Riverdale. So it's not to say that they haven't been a good partner, but at the end of the day, when we decided as a city to go into the school business, we picked one of the most expensive endeavors to go into. And our citizens expect a world-class education. I hear it from them. People without kids in school have very high expectations for our district, and they reap the benefits through their property values. So I think that our city has to prioritize and just make sure that they understand. And I think a relationship with the alderman helps open lines of communication, but I definitely think that we need to do better in the funding department.
All right, this question goes to Mr. Curry. The efforts of the board, that the board has made towards school safety has been commendable. What would you do to further commitment to safety in the GMSD?
Yeah, we've done a great job with our facilities. As I mentioned before, we really need to get Houston Middle School solved as quickly as possible. Again, having that as the only school without a secured entrance, I think that should be of top priority for us. But I mean, I can't really thank our school resource officers enough. They're fantastic. The ones I've personally dealt with, I mean, they love the students. They're a great presence in our schools. So I feel like as long as we're going through the programs, the safety programs that are there, I think we're still in good shape. And I have complete faith in our GPD. But again, I think from the facility concern standpoint, we need to make sure that we're providing the safest environment possible for our children.
Mr. Williams?
Making investments to improve the physical safety of our facilities remains important. The city and the district continue to work closely together on enhancing the security posture of our facilities, and I think everyone appreciates that collaboration. But there's another component to school safety that we cannot overlook, and that's the psychological safety of our students and our teachers. For students to feel comfortable in the academic environment, we must continue investing in programs to address the social emotional well-being of students. They need to feel comfortable being themselves and know that they won't be bullied for being just who they are. They need to have the courage to take risks academically in order to learn and grow. Our teachers, too, need to feel safe and supported so that they can innovate and experiment with new teaching methods to enhance student mastery. So it's not only physical safety, but also psychological safety.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. This next question goes to you, question from the community. What is your stance on vocational training or a vocational path of education as opposed to the university path? And how would you work to expand vocational options in Germantown?
I believe our educational programming should focus on meeting the needs of all students. We've got outstanding programs in the academics, the arts, and career and technical training, and athletic programs too, so that all students can grow and excel in areas of their interest. But as you noticed, or as you mentioned, not all students want to attend college to focus on academic pursuits. Some want to be actors or musicians. Some want to become certified IT professionals. Some simply just want to get a job where they can be productive and valued. We already have outstanding programs in many of these areas, and we must continue to prioritize the investments we make as a district in these programs. We've got several, 13 of the 16 Tennessee CTE career clusters are being offered at Houston High, and we've added 30 new CTE classes since 2014, and we need to continue to poll students and parents to determine what new offerings they would be interested in pursuing.
Mr. Curry?
Well, if you've ever had a plumber or an electrician out to your house, you know how much you have to pay them. And so I think there's maybe a stigma that maybe you don't make as much money going to the trades, and I would vehemently disagree with that. Not every student needs to go to college, truthfully. Let's just admit that. The ones that are going to college, I think we need to prepare them as best as possible and give them a good, well-rounded curriculum. But if we have students that express an interest in going into a trade or a vocation, then I think we need to encourage that, and I want us to have our offerings to be able to support that. One of the offerings that I'd like to find out more about, I know 2 years ago we heard about a health sciences academy, and I haven't seen really where we are with that, but I'd like for us to go back and take a look at that and make sure that we have good academies and good offerings for our students.
Moving on to the next question, we really talk about capital. And Mr. Curry, this is going to go to you. What are your capital priorities should you be elected to the school board?
I think your largest capital priority obviously is your facilities. And so we're looking at, if the numbers are right, I think it's about a $10 million roughly, probably with construction costs a little bit more, expansion of Houston Middle School to take care of that. So that's going to be our most expensive endeavor. But I think we really need to make sure that we are investing programmatically. I've had many conversations with parents about our support for the arts. And I feel like we can probably do better from a funding perspective and take the arts seriously. I know in the strategic plan, there was only one mention of the arts. So I think it's going to cost money to do that. So I think facilities first and then programmatically second.
Mr. Williams?
The first capital spending priority probably will be the Houston Middle expansion. I think everyone recognizes that there's a coming capacity issue in the middle school grade band in about 3 or 4 years. Did the demographer study from several years ago has projected that we'll be about 200 students or so over the capacity of the 2 middle school facilities. So we've got a plan. We're working on negotiating with the city, I guess, for support of that expansion at Houston Middle School. But we need to continue partnering with the city on strategic and meaningful capital investments. I think we've got about a 5-year capital improvement plan set out that's going to require capital expenditures in approximately the range of about $10 to $12 million. So we still have some leftover deferred maintenance needs from when we inherited our schools that we need to address.
All right, thank you. Mr. Williams, let's go into the board advocacy portion of the questioning. We'll start with you. From the community, this community question, would you be willing to advocate for a decision by the board that differs from your own?
David, as you know, the school board is a corporate body. There are not 5 individual decision makers on the board. The board acts as a corporate entity, and when the board takes a vote, the board should speak with one voice. There's a leadership principle known as disagree and commit. And it's important to have robust discussion and even disagreement about a decision while the decision is being made. But once the board decides, we should all commit to supporting that decision. Disagreement and debate are helpful to make the decision, but it's actually harmful after the decision is made. It prevents effective execution of the decision, it communicates uncertainty, and it reflects a lack of unity on the board. Now, it's a challenge, really, to commit to something that maybe you're not convinced of, but to do so requires tremendous trust and on the team to always do what's best for students.
Mr. Curry?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you've got to come from a good place. So I know if I'm on the board, I want to make sure that my fellow board members know where I'm coming from, and that they know my heart and that I'm coming from a good place when it comes to discussion and deliberation and decision making. But at the end of the day, there's a good chance we're not all going to agree, and part of that's just being an adult. It would be malpractice to undermine a fellow board member if a decision didn't go my way. And so part of this is during your deliberations to make your case, and hopefully you win your argument. But if you don't, you just have to accept the consequences and lead. There can't be revisiting of the decision. You've got to carry on and be a unified body for sure.
So going back to you, Mr. Curry, and kind of in the same vein, if a parent or a district employee comes to you with an issue or complaint, how should you respond?
The chain of command is very important, and I think a lot of people in the community don't really understand the role of the board. So the role of the board is not to get involved in issues in the classroom. So for instance, if a fellow parent came to me with a concern about something that was going on in their classroom at their school, my first question would be, did you talk to the teacher? And if they've talked to the teacher and didn't get a result, then I would say, have you talked to the principal or the assistant principal? And then vice versa. But if a question came to me, if they just needed information, then I would probably, depending on the protocol, how our superintendent wants to handle it, probably roll the question to him and then let him decide whether he's going to answer the question or however we'd go about getting an answer. But I think as a board member, we don't need to undermine our professional educators. So I think following the chain of command is very important.
Mr. Williams?
Whenever a stakeholder in the success of our schools is willing to provide feedback to me as a board member, my priority is first to listen and then understand the concern and to thank them for the courage to reach out and share it with me. But because the school board members do not run the schools, I would pass that concern to the superintendent for investigation and, if warranted, appropriate action. Part of that handoff, though, has to include a commitment by the superintendent to follow up with the stakeholder. Information must flow from the superintendent to the stakeholder about how their concern was addressed. It's critical to communicate that the feedback was appreciated, considered, taken seriously, and resolved appropriately.
All right, Mr. Williams, this question goes to you. How do you feel further commercial development will impact Germantown Municipal School System?
While the school board isn't a decision maker on new developments in the city, the district is certainly a key stakeholder in the outcome of those decisions. The impact of any new residential developments on school operation, enrollment, and capacities at our buildings must be heard and given considerable weight by the city. We must communicate the district's concerns clearly, effectively, and often. But we probably need to update the demographic study from 2017 and our master facilities plan based on the new 2020 census results and any potential new residential development that might take place, for example, at the former Germantown Country Club property. When I think back to my own involvement in the formation of our district in 2012, Our community wanted our new school district's first priorities to be eliminating reliance on portables and reducing class sizes below state maximums. And any new residential development in Germantown must not interfere with those goals.
All right, Mr. Curry, to you.
Top of mind for me is the Germantown Country Club Development Project. We don't know how many housing units are going in there, but every one of those is zoned for Houston Middle School and then would be also zoned currently for Farmington Elementary. So we know that Houston Middle School already has an overcrowding problem, thus the need for the expansion. Also in the southeast corner of the city, there are 650 housing units in the pipeline, and every one of those is zoned for Houston Middle School. And then you have Care For on the western side of the city, and all of those are zoned for Riverdale. So you're dealing with schools that really don't have a lot of capacity. So I think there has to be a very frank discussion with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to make sure that they understand the impacts that we're going to have. And I agree that we probably need the demographer to come back and take a look, but we cannot put our students in a situation where we're overcrowded again. We've done a good job of trying to solve those issues, but we can't negatively impact our students and our teachers with overcrowding.
Mr. Curry, this question goes to you. When we had the demerger, Germantown there was an agreement to give or title based upon a payment all schools except for the namesake Germantown High, Germantown Middle, and Germantown Elementary. If you are elected to the school board, will you advocate a position to make sure that those schools return back to the GMSD?
Yeah, I've talked to many of the neighbors surrounding Germantown Elementary and Germantown Middle in particular, and the hurt is still there from them losing the schools. And I feel it every time I talk to them. A lot of the problems that we have at the middle school level in particular are because we don't have those schools. So you can look at the decisions that have been made years ago and how they're impacting us today. The problem that we have is we don't have a willing seller. And so you just can't drive down the road and you see a house and say, I want to go buy your house. Chances are pretty good you're not going to be able to buy the house. So I think at such time where the schools become available, I think we really need to take a look at it. Now, that won't just be a school decision. That'll be a city decision because we're going to have the capital funding. But I'm all for, if at the appropriate time the opportunity comes up, I'm definitely for taking a look at it and see if our needs match at the time.
Mr. Williams?
The legacy Germantown schools are exactly that, a legacy. There are many families who I've spoken to over the past several weeks that their entire family went to all three Germantown schools. So they play an important part of our community legacy and history. That being said, we can't buy them if they don't want to sell them. Now, I do agree that at some point in the future that posture might change, and we would obviously, given our capacity needs and enrollment needs and facility needs at the time, take it into consideration. But I think that at this point and at this moment in time, I think those acquiring those buildings is probably not something that's going to happen, at least in the near term.
All right, thank you. Let's move over to state initiatives. So, Mr. Williams, this goes to you. What is your position on school vouchers, allowing public school money to be used to fund private school tuition?
I disagree with the state's approach. I understand the issue that the state is trying to address through the voucher program, giving parents more educational choices when their children are zoned to attend poorly performing schools. That's a valid and important interest, but I think my immediate concern is that the voucher program is diverting funds from those very school buildings, those very systems, when they need it the most. You know, I'm concerned that the non-public schools that receive those public funds through this program are not being held to the same rigorous standards that public schools do. And I think that whenever a non-public school receives public funds, there should be some accountability for that. These concerns, though, may all be moot because I think the Nashville Chancery Court has determined that the voucher program is unconstitutional.
Mr. Curry?
Yeah, so this is about to be a pretty significant issue because the president has stated that he's all for school choice. And so if there's a second term of the Trump administration, this is going to be front and center. I am not in favor of money going to private schools, taxpayer money going to private schools. And I get the issue, and they're trying to solve an issue that really is probably more local to Metro Nashville and to Shelby County schools, but the impacts on us are significant. And so I get that parents don't want to and they shouldn't have to send their kid to a failing school. Those issues I think are probably solved in the Shelby County school system, maybe through development of magnet schools or whatever they can do to be able to have suitable education for their high achievers. But anything that negatively impacts our funding, obviously we can't be for as a school board.
Mr. Curry, this question goes to you in the same vein. Charter schools obviously have become front and center as an educational model that's being pushed by the president as well as the state. What is your position on the expansion of charter schools, particularly since you would be an approving authority if a charter school decided that they wanted to position themselves within Germantown within the Germantown city limits?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I guess that probably, if you look at what might happen in Germantown, I don't see that happening here in Germantown just due to the quality of our education system here in the city. We are, one of the highest performing districts in the state, so I don't anticipate that would ever be a need here in Germantown. Again, I see that being more of an issue dealing with Shelby County school system just due to their school situation here. But again, anything that diverts money away from our municipal school system, I'm not in for at all.
Mr. Williams?
Charter schools probably do make sense in some systems, but given our standing in the state rankings, probably not a viable solution to provide parents additional choice in their schools for their students. Parents in Germantown have the choice to send their kids to any elementary school that has space and any middle school that has space. They're all zoned to Houston High. So if a parent is concerned about, like me, I'm choosing to send my kids to Riverdale School because I appreciate and understand the value of the K-8 model. And I have that choice under current policies, and I would hope to protect that as a school board member.
All right, Mr. Williams, this question goes to you. What is your position on the use of standardized testing as the main means to measure student performance and teacher performance?
State and local testing play an important role in evaluating our district's performance. The district is committed to a data-driven approach for understanding student performance, evaluating programs, evaluating teachers, and allocating resources. But I believe a once-a-year test is not as effective in measuring mastery as continuous evaluation and feedback. Many employers have decided that continuous real-time feedback is more valuable to employees than an annual performance review because both employees and employers can immediately understand performance issues, both good and bad, and take steps to address those. Likewise, Continuous assessment and feedback through quarterly benchmark assessments help students and teachers understand where students are along the path to mastery. We should continue to advocate for the authority to determine our own plan and tools to evaluate student mastery.
Thank you, Mr. Curry.
Under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which took the place of No Child Left Behind, unfortunately, standardized testing is required. So we don't really have much choice in that regard. The thing I would say about the standardized testing, I don't want us to tie our teacher evaluations and student grades to the test. I think the stakes are too high. You have kids that just don't test well, and I really hate to penalize a teacher for the outcome of how a student performs on a test. I just don't think that's fair. I think a more fair way to evaluate teachers would be to take a look at their entire body of work for the year. And are our students prepared to go on to the next grade level? I am in favor of our case testing, the benchmark testing. I think that's important. I think it's important not only for teachers but for parents. I want to know where my kid is. I want to know how they're performing, and do I need to intervene, or are we on track? And so I'm all for that, but definitely anything we can do to minimize the impact of our standardized testing, I think we need to pursue it as a board.
Kind of following that same train of thought, using standardized, and this is to you, Mr. Curry, using standardized testing as a means to measure teacher performance and also drive their pay based upon their scores. Many school districts have moved away from step increases as well as paying teachers for advanced degrees in favor of a merit-based pay system. Would you be in favor of a merit-based pay system versus traditional step, as well as paying extra money for advanced degrees?
Yeah, so coming from the corporate world, that's one of the things that you evaluate as you reward pay based on performance. But in the education system, I don't know that that's necessarily the way to go. I think that we need to compensate for advanced degrees. If you have a master's or a doctorate, then I think we need to compensate you for that. You've done a lot of work to get to that point. Your skill set should be advanced, and so I'm definitely in favor of that. And I think it incentivizes teachers to maybe pursue an advanced degree. So I think that we need to reward advanced degrees. But again, basing everything off of a test, it just does not sit well with me. And it's not fair to the teachers to do that. So again, evaluate the body of work throughout the year. How are our students progressing? But from what I've seen here in GMSD, we pretty much go with step increases, and that seems to work for now. But we need to do right by our teachers and be fair.
Mr. Williams?
Having been a part of a teacher evaluation system that was based on testing, I can tell you the teachers do not like it. It's a once-a-year test. You don't know whether the child who took the test had a meal the morning of, had got up grumpy, slept late, had some issue at the house. So you really don't know whether that's a valid assessment of their performance for the year. So that one single snapshot really isn't fair to our teachers. But everyone appreciates that having the highest quality teachers in every classroom is the most powerful tool we have to achieve maximum educational outcomes. So we've made some investments here in Germantown to support new teachers, the Blue Chips program, but we've got to create a new pay structure that recognizes and rewards our most experienced teachers as well.
Okay. Mr. Williams, next question goes to you. Houston High ACT scores are some of the highest in the state. What policy initiatives would you advocate to drive further performance from your high-performing high school?
Academic performance is a valid means to evaluate our school's performance as a district. It's very easy to focus on numbers and data, but our kids are more than numbers. A student can excel in advanced calculus, speak 3 languages, get high marks, but if they can't manage their emotions, they can't control and deal with conflict and build and establish relationships, none of that other stuff really matters. So we've got to not only be leading Tennessee in academic performance, but we've also got to be focused on developing the leadership skills, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and work ethic our children will need to succeed in life, no matter what path they choose when they leave high school.
Mr. Curry?
Well, just dealing with ACT scores, if you are a parent sending your kid to college, that's the most important test that you can take. Currently, right now, Houston High School is number 4 in the state out of the general admission high schools. We trail Brentwood and Ravenwood, who both in the 2019 TDOE report card had a 27.5 ACT, and then Franklin had a 27.1. We came in at 26.3, which is still outstanding from a state level. But I think we need to recognize that we do have opportunity there and make sure that while we are proud of our accomplishments, do realize that we still have opportunity there. So personally, I would like to see our board really take a look at benchmarking off of what they're doing in Williamson County. Brentwood and Ravenwood High School average 1.2 points higher on the ACT than we do. And so I want to see what they're doing and how can we benchmark and bring some best practices in to help benefit our students that are going to college.
Mr. Curry, this question goes to you. Earlier, we brought up the question about the BEP, the Basic Education Program, that the state uses as a formula to fund education across the state. On a regular basis, the state changes the requirements of the BEP based upon the ability of a county to pay. And we see more and more of the BEP money that the state has allocated continue to be moved across the state to rural districts, leaving more of the burden on the local school district. How will you advocate and how will you participate in the process to fix that?
I've talked to our superintendent quite a few times about this, and it's a very valid concern that we're faced with here in our district. You know, any loss of funding is going to negatively impact us. So I think through our advocacy to the state, through our Tennessee Legislative Network representative, currently it's Mrs. Griffith, I think that we need to make sure that we're making our position known to our lawmakers, and I think we as a board need to be unified in that approach. But we have to speak up and speak loudly. This is also an issue where local residents, if they're concerned, I urge them to contact their state representatives and state senators. At the end of the day, the legislature in Nashville can fix this. And so if our stakeholders in the district that are voters, if they make their voices heard, I think that can make a difference. But I think it's up to us as a board to help drive that discussion and make sure that our stakeholders are aware of the issues.
Ms. Williams?
We should continue to be a strong advocate in the halls of legislature in Nashville. Our voice, our interests, and our concerns need to be heard. We should try our best to build a coalition across the 7 municipal districts in Shelby County, as well as other newly formed municipal schools in the state. I think everyone recognizes that given the sort of the relationship between municipal districts, the city that they're in and the county that they're in, they have sometimes different interests than just county schools do, especially concerning operational and capital funding. So we need our own coalition to raise those issues in the State House. But I think the most important thing is to continue to have a positive, respectful, and productive relationship with the legislatures that represent us in Nashville.
So as a follow-up to that question, this goes back to you. Routinely, the state legislature, both Tennessee House and state senator in this area are on the different side of vouchers, BEP funding, charter schools, and typically it does not align with what the GMSD wants. So how do you approach those relationships kind of moving forward?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I've sort of spent my career building coalitions and across organizations that sometimes have different interests and concerns. And I think it's a matter of just frank communication and having a good relationship. We need to make it clear to the 3 representatives that represent our city that what our concerns are, what our needs are, and then build a coalition around that. Most municipal districts, most county districts, most municipal districts only have 1 representative. So we've got 3. We've got an opportunity to build a coalition there and have a little bit more say in what goes on in the halls of the legislature.
Mr. Curry?
Yeah, so in our city, Senator Kelsey and Representative Mark White were very active in the voucher program. So they definitely were at odds with our GMSD board. That doesn't mean that we can't make our feelings known to them and work with them in a respectful and productive manner. I think that we have to make sure that they understand that the decisions that are made at the legislature, how they impact us. They might not consider the unforeseen consequences that a decision that's made. How does it hurt giving voucher money to Shelby County students to solve a problem that exists in Shelby County schools but not in Germantown? If there's a negative impact on us, then we have to make sure that that's known loud and clear. But we have multiple representatives and state senators that represent Germantown. I think we have to be working with them productively and respectfully in order to make sure that our wishes and our feelings are known.
And this is the last question I'm going to ask. It's going to go to you before we go to final comments, okay? The Shelby County Commission is, next to the state, the largest funding body for the Germantown Municipal School District. Routinely, the Shelby County Commission asks for municipal school districts to provide a presentation of their budget, and at times look for ways to circumvent the ADA funding that comes from what they provide to Shelby County schools through things like one-time funding. Okay, so how would you approach and advocate before the Shelby County Commission that Germantown deserves its equal share of funding, although they do not see it as equitable for the entire group of school districts? Yes, Mr. Curry.
Yeah, so we're fortunate right now to have the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mark Billingsley, as a Germantown resident. So I think right now, I think we're in pretty good shape as far as that goes. Obviously, county commission, those elections matter, and so in 2 years, we'll have a slate of county commissioners. This is an issue where I think we can really work with our fellow municipal districts, so working with Bartlett, Millington, Arlington, Lakeland, and Collierville to really make sure that we're putting up a unified front, because I don't think it's just going to be singling out Germantown. I don't think that we would be the lone victim in that. I think anything that would happen there is going to also negatively impact the other municipalities. And so I think working with our partner municipalities and working with our local Shelby County commissioners, again, respectful, productive relationships to make sure that they understand the impacts of what it could mean not only to our students but our city if funding were cut.
Mr. Williams.
Funding for education in Shelby County is about a third of county revenues, county expenditures. So it's a pretty big, significant investment by the county in the schools here in Shelby County. It requires a relationship. It requires collaborative problem solving to address concerns and interests and needs. And it does require coalition building amongst all the municipal school districts, because we're kind of all in the same boat when it comes to the impacts of reductions in ADA funding.
Okay, so that's the end of my questioning. We're going to move to final closing statements, and we're going to start with Mr. Curry. 90 seconds.
All right, thank you to the Leadership Germantown Alumni Association. Thank you, David, and thank you, Scott, for, I think, what was a very productive forum tonight. The future of Germantown is directly tied to the success of our school system. Our success, though, isn't defined by test scores, but it's defined by ensuring that our students are college and career ready and that they're receiving a well-rounded education. Every Germantown homeowner does have a vested interest in the success of our school district, so I think we have the duty to perform as a district. We need a strong board, but we also need to bring the community together. I hope I've made it clear this evening. I'm fully in support of our teachers. I think our educators do a fantastic job in the city. I have a long track record of reaching out to others in this city, being both courteous and professional, but working towards solutions. I know the importance of listening to people, and as a board member, that's one of our most important jobs, and that's regardless of their perspective. I believe in building bridges to make better connections to bring people together. Our elected officials need to set an example for our citizens. I bring a new and fresh perspective to the board. I also bring an operations perspective that's not currently represented. The voters ultimately have to decide who's going to be the strongest voice for our board, and I hope that decision is for me. Thank you to everyone for watching tonight, and I humbly ask for your consideration and your vote.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Reeves and Leadership Germantown Association for tonight's candidate forum. Tonight, you've heard where I believe our schools are doing well and where we can do better, and how I can leverage my experience as an educator, a professional negotiator, an attorney, and a parent to serve the students, teachers, and parents of our district. As our time together draws to a close, I want to share with you my strongly held beliefs about service on the school board. I believe that every student can find educational success, no matter their career path or academic trajectory. I believe we should hold school leaders accountable for maximizing positive educational outcomes for all students. I believe community engagement is critical in aligning school performance with community expectations. I believe we must make strategic investments in our students, our teachers, and our schools. I believe school board members must always make decisions in the best interest of children. When we do what's best for our students, we do what's best for our community. I believe in the power of education to change kids' lives. When you're at the ballot box, you will be making a choice about who you believe will be the most effective board member to serve the students, teachers, and parents of our district, and to always do what's best for kids. I humbly ask for your vote when you make that choice.
I want to thank Mr. Scott Williams, Mr. Brian Curry tonight. I think it's been a great time. Thank you for answering the questions directly and keeping it productive. I appreciate Leadership Germantown and Alice and all you guys do to help really get these issues in front of voters, because we need to do that. And we also thank the City of Germantown for their facilities tonight. Germantown, it's up to you at this point. Thank you guys for this time, and take care.